Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers. Let's sit around the campfire together and talk about Dead by Daylight. Specifically, the definitive sci-fi horror classic, Alien, and the potential it could have as a DVD's next licensed chapter. For as long as I have made Potential and Problems videos, this has been a highly requested franchise to cover, and for very good reason. Released in 1979, Alien is one of the 6 horror movies ever put on the National Film Registry, and is considered one of the greatest science fiction movies and one of the greatest horror movies of all time. Being considered an all-time classic of one subgenre is an incredible achievement for a film. Being considered for 2 is frankly greedy, and is testament to the unbelievably massive cultural impact Alien had and continues to have. Like basically every horror film at that time that would go on to be an all-time classic, Alien was received with mixed reviews from critics, and I have a theory as to why. Horror and science fiction were both subgenres that were looked on with disdain by mainstream critics at the time. For horror, you could argue that's still the case, and critics who went in expecting a conventional space opera in the vein of Star Wars or Close Encounters of the Third Kind did not get what they were expecting, meaning almost nobody was happy with Alien when it first got released. Nevertheless, the film has aged masterfully. Like, I'm talking Barbara Crampton masterfully. And given rise to a long line of sequels, and I'm going to be a little controversial here and say that barring Resurrection, every Alien sequel is at least pretty good. I will defend Prometheus and Covenant to the bitter end, and even Resurrection, despite its absurd campiness, is a lot of fun at times, and Ron Perlman and Winona Ryder are great to watch on screen, even in a movie that does neither of them justice. Sorry Terminator, but Alien is the definitive sci-fi horror film, and that has not escaped the attention of Dead by Daylight's player base. Alien is without a doubt one of the most requested horror licenses the game has yet to receive, and today I want to talk about why. What's so appealing about Alien over basically any other sci-fi franchise out there as an entry in DBD's roster, what the most obvious choices for Survivor and Killer could bring to the table, and finishing, as is tradition, with my power concept for the Killer. But first, are you an employee of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, or any other corporation, that has put your safety in jeopardy? If so, I know just the people you can call to get the compensation you deserve. Morgan & Morgan, America's biggest injury lawyers, have your back. And when it comes to picking legal battles, size really matters. No matter the nature of your claim, car accident, slip and fall, workplace injury, xenomorph attack, Morgan & Morgan has lawyers specialising in it, with over 800 lawyers and 4,000 case staff across 100 offices throughout the US. Wait, sorry, do you mind? I'm just going to take this. Hiya. Wait, you guys don't cover xenomorph attacks? It's fine. I'll just cut it out in the edit. When dealing with personal injury, it's very easy to feel bad to sue. But remember, you're not suing an individual person, you're suing their insurance company that's sitting on billions of dollars. There's no shame looking for the compensation you deserve, and with their no-win, no-fee policy, Morgan & Morgan are ready and waiting to take up the fight for you. If you find yourself injured and need representation, you can get in touch with Morgan & Morgan for yourself. My links to them are in the description and the pinned comment, or you can take a look at forthepeople.com or dial #KeyLaw to get in touch. Now, back to Alien. The original Alien takes place on an isolated cargo vessel called the Nostromo, owned by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, whose crew are awoken from stasis to answer a distress signal on a distant moon. But when Executive Officer Kane, played by the late great John Hurt, stumbles across a room full of strange growths that look almost like eggs, the crew of the Nostromo suddenly find themselves at the mercy of a creature from another world, the Xenomorph, that stalks the ship and picks off the crew one by one. The only survivors are Ellen Ripley and her cat Jonesy, who barely squeeze out of the disaster in an escape pod and hurl the Xenomorph into the vacuum of space. One of the major draws of Alien as a suspenseful horror masterpiece is that feeling of incredible isolation and powerlessness that starts as soon as the first Xenomorph eggs are discovered. In a lot of horror media, you find yourself asking questions that risk breaking your immersion while watching the film. Why don't they just call the police? Why doesn't anyone help them? Or why are they running such a stupid way? But in space, no one can hear you scream. That's the thing. And the film does not hesitate to remind you how infinitesimally small each of the Nostromo's crew members are against the vastness of space and the horrors it contains. I mean, it's not to say there's not any dumb decisions in Alien, like this idiot who just decides to go off on his own, even when his Xenomorph is nearby, and growing, you terminally brainless bumblefuck. Right, well, okay. Back on topic. Despite the insane popularity of Alien, both as a franchise and among DVD players, the fact that we haven't heard hide nor hair of Alien DVD seemed to indicate to many people that we'll never see it take place, especially since more niche licenses like Hellraiser, Ringu and arguably Silent Hill have arrived in DVD before Alien. Many have attributed this to 20th Century Fox being stingy with giving the rights to a relatively no-name Canadian game studio, but times have changed. And if that was ever true, I'm almost certain it's not true now. For one, Fox is now owned by Disney, who've historically been far more liberal giving their licenses out than Fox, especially when it comes to brands that Disney aren't directly responsible for, brands that they just own outside of what is known as the Disney Heartlands. The merger between Disney and Fox was finalised on March 20th, 2019, and less than 2 years later, Ripley and the Xenomorph arrived in Fortnite. Since then we've had Sora in Smash Ultimate, the host of Marvel and Star Wars licensed games, and the fan-servicey crossover extravaganza that was Spider-Man No Way Home. The House of Mouse knows that crossovers and nostalgia bait makes fucking bank, and have proven themselves more than willing to license out the IPs they own but didn't necessarily create to third parties to cash in on that. Based on recent history, there's a good chance Disney is more liberal with the rights to Alien than Fox has ever been, and we could be closer to an Alien chapter in Dead by Daylight than we've ever been before. For all we know, it could even be the first chapter of the new year. So what kind of thing could we expect from an Alien chapter? Let's start with the obvious, the only real choice for a killer, the titular alien, the Xenomorph. While the sequel Aliens is incredibly popular and has redefined how science fiction movies are made and perceived ever since its release, I personally prefer the original. In large part because of how the film frames and presents the Xenomorph as a threat. The original film did something that none of the sequels and honestly very few other sci-fi films have ever managed to do properly. It's a sci-fi slasher flick, and a bloody good one at that. The dynamic between the terrifying Xenomorph and our leading lady Ellen Ripley, played by the inimitable Sigourney Weaver in the role that made her a star, is virtually indistinguishable from Michael Myers and Laurie Strode, or the Deadites and Ash Williams. A tenacious and instinctual predator hunting down the last glimmer of light as their friends and colleagues die around them. It's one of the most terrifying images in the history of science fiction, the biologically perfect hunter that's terrorised our screens since 1979. But what actually is a Xenomorph? I don't fucking know. I'll be honest with you, I don't have a fucking clue about the movies and shows I talk about. Like, you guys seen enough of my videos to know that by now, right? If only there was a way to show you everything you need to know about a Xenomorph in a compact and informative package. Oh shit. I just got an email from these guys, the Weyland-Yutani Productions. Oh, that's sweet. I wonder what they've got to say. The Xenomorph is one of the most charming and compelling creatures in the animal kingdom. With its incredible strength, sharp teeth and claws, and blood of concentrated molecular acid, the Xenomorph is not lacking in self-defense systems. However, the most fascinating element of the Xenomorph's biology can be seen when it's time to mate. Once the eggs laid by the queen are found by a suitable host organism, this charming little fellow holds the host's face in a firm but tender grip. The bond between incubator and impregnator is one of the most intimate found in nature, and yet, despite the initial agitation of the host, they swiftly get settled into their new lifestyle. After these few hours of passion, the host is released to live their life normally, and it is only when the Xenomorph embryo inside the living host is fully mature that they may notice something is amiss. But by then it is of course too late. And before long, the young Xenomorph will evacuate from the host body in spectacular fashion. The young Xenomorph will develop into an adult in a matter of hours. And while this does unfortunately kill the host, such is the price for being one of the finest and most fascinating life forms in the universe. Wow, wasn't that interesting? So, now you know everything you need to know about Xenomorph biology and anatomy, let's talk about what it could bring to Dead by Daylight as a potential killer. I think the defining feature of Alien, and what makes the original Xenomorph so scary, is something most of the sequels either miss or actively try to erase. By setting a horror movie in the remote depths of space, there's this inevitability of death coming for you. This certainty that if you don't save yourself, you will die screaming and unremembered, with nobody ever even finding your body. This even extends to the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, who revealed to have known about the distress signal ahead of time, and effectively condemned the crew to death to study and capture the creature. From the word go, the crew of the Nostromo are framed as expendable, to the point of insignificance, tiny lives barely even worth mourning, against the vastness of an uncaring universe. This gigantic cosmic loneliness is almost Lovecraftian, and it's why Alien is such a scary movie. If Alien and the Xenomorph were to be introduced to Dead by Daylight, this would be an imperative part of the movie to keep in adaptation. The atmosphere of Alien is absolutely sublime, and the opportunity to use that to keep DBD's atmosphere fresh and frightening cannot be missed. The Xenomorph also has the possibility of some really interesting cosmetic options based on its various appearances and evolution throughout the franchise. Perhaps a Xenomorph with a metallic shell, to reference the lead mold trap used in Alien 3, or the Deacon from Prometheus with its pointy head. You could even reach into crossover territory with Alien vs Predator cosmetics. Maybe Grid from the original movie with its distinctive scars caused by a predator's razor net. Or even the much maligned but indisputably badass Predalien from AVP Requiem. Regardless, I think the Xenomorph should be most closely inspired by its appearance in the original movie. My biggest gripe with Aliens is how the Xenomorph stopped being truly threatening. At least, stopped being any more threatening than any other random alien race in a sci-fi movie. We go from a single Xenomorph being an atmospheric nightmare to behold, to hordes of them being gunned down by colonial marines. Yes, they almost wipe out the marines completely, but the marines give way better than they get, and most of you just get bogged down in raw numbers. Barring Alien Isolation, no Xenomorph is ever scarier than the one in the original film. I think the best course of action, therefore, would be to adapt the Xenomorph's power and hunting style from that first film. This means, and it's going to be controversial, its power should not involve speed. The Xenomorphs are never shown to actually run quickly until the tunnel chase in the third film. And remember, that Xenomorph grew from a dog, and inherited some of the dog's traits. Most notably, it was quadrupedal. A human-born Xenomorph is bipedal, and is basically never shown running, preferring to close the gap with their prey using stealth and attacking from unusual angles. They don't need to run. By the time the prey knows they're there, it's already far too late to run. Once the Xenomorph is in close quarters with you, you're pretty much on a one-way trip to the land of the fucked. It just sort of rips you to bits. I don't think there's a lot you could really do with that, it's not very special really. Instead, I think something fun could be done with one of the most persistently disconcerting creatures in the whole of science fiction. The Facehugger. This spindly little creature is part of the reproductive cycle of the Xenomorphs. It hatches from the eggs and attaches itself to a victim's face to inject a Xenomorph embryo into their body, through the throat while they're still alive. The Facehugger will die once this is completed, but that pretty much seals the fate of the victim, who only has a few hours before, A Xenomorph power in DBD would be incomplete without these mean mother huggers, but there would need to be some restraint. Getting face-hugged is effectively a delayed death sentence. Between the vice-like grip, the acidic blood that is cutting it off impossible, and the tail that will choke the victim to death or break their neck if the hugger is prized off, there's really no reality in which the victim will survive an attack. This can't really work completely in DBD, I think, The notion of a little creature that just fucking kills you, even eventually with nothing you can do about it, really isn't something survivors will particularly appreciate. You know the average survivor can't handle unusual lethality mechanics when Sadako has one of the highest kill rates in the whole game. I think there would need to be a balancing act in play. The facehugger should be kind of an inconvenience. One that synergizes with the stealth power and maybe hypothetically could get you killed, but still letting the survivors do a lot of things to mitigate that, by themselves and as part of a team. So we've got two separate power elements to work with. The agile, predatory stealth that lets the Xenomorph close distance with the target, and the facehugger to provide some horrifying inevitability to survivors. A power is starting to take shape here. Before we get round to it, I'll talk first about a survivor and a map. I've actually taken the liberty of compiling a list in this little book of every possible survivor that would be satisfying and popular representation in Dead by Daylight. Give me a quick second to find it. Okay. Ellen Ripley. Yeah, that's it. It's just Ripley. Ripley isn't just the obvious choice, she's the only choice. Straight up, anything short would be a disservice. The role that made Sigourney Weaver into a household name and genre legend, the female protagonist against whom every other female protagonist in the history of genre cinema will inevitably measured against, for better or worse. If an Alien chapter ever came to DVD and didn't have Ripley, the PR would be so bad it would probably tank the sales of the whole chapter. That's how important Ripley is. Her arc between Alien and the end of Alien 3 is one of the most satisfying you'll see in science fiction cinema, and much of the praise that Aliens especially received was how it treated Ripley and redefined her, from a survivor who barely escaped the first movie into a true blue action hero. There's not really much to talk about here. If they want to stick closer to the canon, they could take her shaved head look from Alien 3 as her base look, but each movie she's in has a distinct and compelling new clothing and hairstyle choice, and they would all work really well for her, either as her base look or as cosmetics. With the killer and survivor pretty much squared away, all that's left to rediscuss is a map. And I know the first word coming out of everyone's mouths is going to be Nostromo. And I get it. The Nostromo is an unbelievably iconic location. The atmosphere is gorgeous and claustrophobic and defines the whole movie, and it wouldn't work at all. If there's one thing we've learned from RPD, it's that a licensed map can be as loyal as you want, but it has to function as a map in Dead by Daylight if players are going to not hate playing on it. The Nostromo just doesn't. It's too claustrophobic, to the point a lot of killers just won't have powers on those super tight corridors, and they'd need to add stairs and take away the ladders that the crew uses to traverse the ship, because DVD doesn't have a ladder climb mechanic. It would be a disastrous choice for a map. They'd have to severely compromise and change it to work as a functional game piece, and at that point, why try adapting it at all? A far better idea would be to look at the sequels. The Hadley's Hope base in Aliens is better, but honestly you don't see a lot of it outside of a few rooms. And while the central chamber with the alien queen in it is a fantastic set piece, the rest of it is, I hate to say, pretty unmemorable. Nah, if we're looking for the best DBD map Alien could offer us, we shouldn't be looking at the first or second films, but instead the third. Alien Cubed was a troubled production that went through screenplays and writers like I go through toy swords, and the resulting movie was not exactly amazing. I will defend it more than most, simply because I don't idolise aliens like a lot of people do, and so my expectations for the film were a bit more realistic. But I won't deny, there's quite a bit wrong with this film. However, one part of it that I unashamedly love, that I think was done fantastically, is the set and production design. The prison world of Fiorina 161 is gorgeously realised. Even Roger Ebert said Alien 3 was the best looking bad movie he'd ever seen, and if that isn't an endorsement of the gorgeous foundry tattoo of the movie, I don't know what is. Imagine the final area full of corridors and platforms as the map, with a giant lead mould on the metal gantry where Ripley jumped to her death. Perhaps a generator can sit on top of the lead mould, and when the generator's done, the mould closes so you can walk across the top. Kinda like what the Silent Hill chapter did. You'd have representation from all the first three movies. A Xenomorph based heavily on the one from the first movie, Ripley rocking all the badass characterization she got from Aliens, and then mapped from the fantastically grim setting of Alien 3. I think picking elements of the original 3 movies gives us the best collector representation Alien could possibly hope for, to satisfy all fans of the franchise and give us a licensed chapter worthy of its esteemed heritage. And as usual, I'm going to end it off with a power concept. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. The Xenomorph's power is called Apex of Biology, and it comes in 2 parts: Hunter Mode and Grim Hatchery. In Hunter Mode, the Xenomorph hunkers close to the ground, moving at 4.0 meters per second, becomes undetectable and moves silently. In Hunter Mode, it can crawl over drop pallets and vault windows much faster than normal. That's kind of it. But Grim Hatchery is where things start to get interesting. Grim Hatchery. The Xenomorph can use the activity button to deploy an egg. The Xenomorph starts with 4 and can carry no more than 4. An egg can be regenerated by reclaiming the wreckage of a broken egg or hooking a gestated survivor. Eggs can be smashed by survivors in an action that takes 4 seconds. When a survivor walks or runs within 12 meters of an egg, their killer instinct is revealed to the killer. But what comes out of the egg? When the Xenomorph is at least 24 meters away from an egg, it can use the activity button to hatch a facehugger from the egg, which the killer controls for 45 seconds. Facehuggers basically move like Victor does, 150% speed, and can pounce like Victor onto survivors with a wind-up time of 0.75 seconds. When a facehugger hits a survivor or opens a locker with the survivor inside, they are afflicted with the gestated status effect, and are immediately put into Stage 1, at 0 gestation points. Survivors with a facehugger attached gain 1 gestation point per second. It takes 60 points for a survivor to progress to Stage 2, and then again to Stage 3. Survivors without facehuggers attached slowly decay their gestation points down to the bottom of their current stage after a 15-second delay. Gestation points do not accumulate in chase, on hook, or in the dying state, and once you've reached a stage, you can't go back down to a lower stage. Survivors with facehuggers attached suffer from the following debuffs. Stage 1, the survivor becomes broken if they are injured, lingering for 10 seconds once the facehugger gets removed. Stage 2, the survivor is hindered by 7%. Stage 3, when a survivor reaches Stage 3, their killer instinct is revealed. Survivors with facehuggers attached become incapacitated in Stage 3, and if they are downed in this time, they can be killed directly from the dying state. I'm not sure this needs to be reiterated, but I'm going to do it again just in case. Survivors can remove facehuggers in an action that takes 12 seconds, and injures you with its acid blood if you're healthy, or deep wounds you if you're injured when the action is completed. A survivor can remove another survivor's facehugger in 12 seconds without causing any ill effects, however. It can be removed while moving like Victor can, but will not give a speed boost if the survivor is injured this way. And I've got a list of add-ons as well, and pretty proud of some of them. The general idea here is to give survivors a pretty unpleasant choice. When a facehugger finds it attaches itself to them, they can either remove it, injuring themselves against a killer who goes undetectable, or keep it attached to them to find somebody else to remove it safely, at the cost of accruing gestation points during this time, and potentially staging themselves. I'm particularly proud of the add-ons. Chateau Jiaucha Mask and Queen's Skull are a particularly cruel combination that I'm sure Xenomorph players would really enjoy. All in all, I hope you can tell how enthusiastic I am about the potential for Alien in Dead by Daylight. It's a true titan of horror history, and aside from Jason and potentially Candyman, the Xenomorph is one of the few classic horror icons yet to make it into the game. But the next chapter is sooner than it often feels, and for all we know the next 3 months will make me look like a savant again, and we'll finally see the most terrifying extraterrestrial in the universe make its way into Dead by Daylight. That's everything I have to say on Alien. What do you think of my ideas? I should suspect parts of my Xenomorph power and my map choice may be controversial, but I'm pretty happy with what I come up with. If you feel any different, then do let me know in the comments. At time of this video's release, I'm away with my family, so I won't be uploading until after Christmas. But don't worry, I'll still be writing scripts because, well, I guess I'm a bit of a workaholic. Special thanks once again to Morgan and Morgan for continued support of my mad shit videos. If you find yourself in need of compensation, then you can always find representation at Morgan and Morgan. Once again, link in the description and pinned comment, fullpeople.com, or dial #KeyLaw. That's all I really have to say, so You guys have a wonderful holiday season, but be careful. You never know what might be waiting there, just in the corner of your eye.